Hello, listener. The fact you hear this means you're alive. If you're new here, consider subscribing and comment below where you're listening from. Let's begin the story. My name was Jacob Carver, and until that day, I kept my life small on purpose. A rented farmhouse, one gravel road, two neighbors close enough to see but not close enough to bother me. Cornfields on three sides, a line of trees on the fourth, and town about a 15-minute drive away if I hit the lights right. I worked from home doing inventory reports for a farm supply company. Spreadsheets, emails, quiet. It suited me. After a divorce and a short, rough year in the city, the sound of wind in the fields and the occasional pickup on the road felt like a win. That Tuesday started like any other fall day. Cool air, clear sky, a little mist over the ditch behind the barn. The corn was already cut, so I could see all the way to the highway if a truck went by. Nothing special did. I made coffee, fed the stray orange cat that had decided my porch was his, and checked my phone. Weather app, bank app, a couple of dumb memes from my buddy Nate, and 3 missed calls from my mom that I told myself I would return after this one report. The news played low on the TV in the living room while I worked at the kitchen table. Usual stuff. Politics, sports. One story about some riot at an airport on the East Coast that they didn't have much footage of, yet I half listened, half tuned it out. Around noon, I walked the fence line like I always did, just to make sure nothing had fallen or broken. The only thing out of place was a dead bird near the ditch, stiff on its back with its feet up. I made a mental note to grab a shovel later and kept going. Nothing about that morning told me the world was about to change. No strange dreams. No bad feeling in my gut, no sign from above. Just a normal, quiet day in a place I had picked because nothing ever really happened there. The first sign that something was wrong came in the middle of a farm supply spreadsheet. My laptop froze for a second, then my phone lit up on the table. At the same time, the TV cut from daytime talk to a blue screen with a sharp tone that set my teeth on edge. It was the sound they used for tornado warnings, only this time it didn't stop. It kept going, long and flat. My phone showed emergency alert in big white letters. Under that, smaller text read, National Public Safety Message. Shelter in place. Do not leave your home until further notice. This is not a test. The TV matched it almost word for word. A calm male voice read it out. This is a message from the National Emergency Alert System. A nationwide shelter-in-place order is now in effect. Remain indoors. Secure doors and windows. Do not travel. Await further instructions. For a moment, I just sat there with my hands on the keyboard, listening to the tone in that calm voice and trying to make sense of it. The orange cat jumped off the chair and hid under the table. I picked up my phone and checked again, hoping it was a glitch. Same alert, same wording. A second one slid down over it before I could even swipe. Regional notice. If you are already home, stay home. If you are in a public place, seek the nearest indoor shelter. Do not attempt to pick up family, friends, or stranded individuals. Do not stop for people on the road. That last line didn't sit right. Do not stop for people on the road. Out on the gravel, a truck rolled by faster than usual. Earl, my nearest neighbor, drove past toward town. My first thought was to grab my keys and head out. Drive in, find out what had happened. Fill the truck with groceries and gas. Talk to a real person. The alert tone cut back in and overrode the TV again. Same blue screen, same voice, but new text. Update to national alert. Unusual aggressive behavior has been reported in multiple regions following a medical incident at several transportation hubs. Law enforcement and emergency services are overwhelmed. A first zombie alert has been issued by federal authorities. Remain in your home. Do not approach people acting confused, injured, or aggressive. Avoid all physical contact with unknown individuals. The words "first zombie alert" sat in the middle of the screen like a bad joke. I stared at them, waiting for someone to walk it back. Nobody did. The feed cut to a news anchor at a desk. We are aware that many of you just received a message that used the term "first zombie alert," he said. Officials are telling us that is the internal name for a new behavioral emergency protocol. They are asking the public to stay calm and follow the shelter-in-place order. A short clip from an airport played silently beside him. People ran in different directions. Security tried to push them back. The clip cut out after a few seconds. My phone vibrated, this time with a text. "Nate, you seeing this zombie thing?" He wrote. "Yeah." "At my place?" I answered. "You at home?" "On the road," he wrote. "Coming back from Columbus. Traffic is insane. People are getting out of their cars. You should get off the highway," I sent back. "They said stay inside," he replied with a short video. Cars sat bumper to bumper. A woman in a business suit walked between them, barefoot, moving like she was drunk. She bumped into a minivan and left a smear of something dark on the side. Someone yelled at her from a window. She turned toward the sound too fast, then the video ended. "My exit's blocked," he wrote, turning around. The cat nudged his head against my ankle. Outside, wind rattled the bare stalks at the edge of the field. Somewhere far off, a siren started. I went to the front door and opened it a crack. The gravel road looked the same as always, but there was a low sound in the distance, like a crowd that never moved. Across the field to the west, near the tree line, a thin column of smoke rose into the air. There were no houses that way, just pasture and woods. The TV voice kept talking in the background. "Again, if you are at home, stay at home. Lock your doors, close your windows. Do not go outside to record or observe. Authorities are asking you not to signal or draw attention to your location." That last line made me shut the door all the way. Not signal. Not draw attention. The deadbolt slid into place with a solid click that felt too loud in my quiet house. The stove clock read 2:14 p.m. The day still had hours left, but it had taken a turn I couldn't undo. The first thing I did after locking the front door was go through the house and see how easy it would be to obey what the TV kept repeating. "Stay home. Do not go outside." It sounded simple when a calm voice said it. It felt different when the only thing between me and that smoke by the trees was old wood and simple locks. The farmhouse was one story with 3 small bedrooms and a half-finished basement. The front door had a deadbolt and a chain. The back door off the mudroom only had a loose knob lock. The windows were single pane with latches that never seemed to quite catch. I went room to room and clicked every latch down. Kitchen, living room, the spare room I used as an office, my bedroom. I checked the tiny bathroom window twice because it sat right over the back steps. 2 of the latches only locked after I lifted the frame with my shoulder and forced them into place. I turned every lock I had and wished there were more. When I finished, I stood in the living room and listened. The TV was still on low, talking about behavioral events and transport disruptions. The voice kept saying there was no need to panic and that help was being sent. It sounded like any other emergency clip, except they had flashed the word zombie to my phone. Signal bars still showed full. I opened a local news feed instead of social media. One photo showed the grocery store parking lot in town, cars at bad angles, people outside with carts, and no one was going in. Another showed the main highway, a line of vehicles and a man in a hospital gown walking against traffic with his head down and his hands loose at his sides. The caption under both posts said some version of, "No one knows what's going on. Go home." I set the phone down and went to the kitchen window that faced the gravel road. Wind pushed dust down the lane in short bursts. No cars, no Earl coming back. Behind the house, the fields lay flat and cut low. Most days, that open view made me feel safer. That afternoon, it just meant anything out there could see me too. My mom called again. I answered and said, "Hey." "Jacob, thank God. Are you home?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm here," I said. "Doors are locked. You?" "We're at the house," she answered. "The news is telling us to stay put. Are they saying the same thing there?" "Pretty much," I said. "They sent an alert with a stupid name and then told everyone to stay inside and not help anybody on the road." She was quiet for a second. "What stupid name?" she asked. "They called it a first zombie alert," I said. "They keep saying it's just what they call this type of thing, but they still sent it to everybody." "That's not funny," she said. I'm not joking, I answered. Just stay there. I'll stay here. Do not drive in. She let out a breath I could hear through the line. Your father already suggested we all meet at your uncle's, she said. I told him no. We're staying put. Good, I said. Keep the doors locked. If anyone comes to the house acting off, do not open up. Off how? She asked. Like they're drunk or sleepwalking or bleeding or just not right, I said. The alerts keep saying not to help anyone outside, she said. That goes against everything your grandmother ever taught us. I know, I said. Tonight we listen to the alerts. We talked for another minute about food and water and where they had put the old battery lanterns, then we said goodnight even though the sun was still up. I hung up and turned the TV up one notch. A woman had replaced the anchor. A map of the country sat behind her with red circles around a handful of cities and a cluster of counties that included mine. She said many of the affected people had been seen at hospitals and that officials were calling it a medical incident they did not fully understand. She ended the segment with the same line as everyone else. Stay inside. I turned the sound back down and went to the back door. From there I could see Earl's place across the field to the east. His truck was not in the drive. The barn doors were shut. The third neighbor's mailbox sat crooked farther down the gravel road, past his lane. A white sedan was parked just beyond it, half in the ditch, driver's door open. I pressed my forehead to the glass. No one moved around it. I went to the hall closet, pulled out an old pair of binoculars, and came back to the window. The sedan's engine was off. The door hung open. A purse lay on the ground by the front tire. No driver, no passenger. Just the car sitting there in the quiet afternoon. Another alert buzzed on my phone. This one said, State advisory. Avoid hospitals, clinics, and emergency rooms unless directed by authorities. Do not attempt to pick up patients against medical advice. Remain indoors. They were closing off the places people usually ran to when things went bad. I shut the blinds halfway on the back door, enough to look out without someone seeing straight in. A siren wailed closer than before, then faded as it passed the end of the lane and kept going. No one turned in. No one checked on any of us. The house felt smaller with every lock I had set. The fields felt bigger with every empty car that showed up on the road. I watched the sedan at the bend until my eyes hurt, waiting for someone to climb back in or walk away. No one did. By 3 p.m, the white sedan at the bend stopped being just background and started feeling like a problem. It had sat there for more than an hour with the driver's door open and no one moving around it. The alerts had told us not to stop for people on the road. They had not said what to do when a car was abandoned on the road right in front of your place. I stood at the kitchen window with a coffee I didn't really want, watching the gravel. No more trucks, no mail carrier, no Earl coming home. A helicopter passed somewhere to the south, just a low hum over the fields. The cat jumped onto the back of a chair and stared out with me, tail flicking whenever the weeds by the ditch moved. I told myself that if someone came walking up from that sedan steady on their feet, not bleeding, not acting strange, I would crack the door and tell them what the alerts had said. Stay off the roads. Go home. It was an easy promise while the road stayed empty. The first change was a dark shape on the shoulder past the car. At first I thought it was a bag or blanket that had fallen out. Then it slid a few inches, stopped, and slid again in a way the wind never moved anything. I picked up the binoculars and lifted them to my eyes. Someone lay on the gravel half in the ditch, dark jacket, dark hair, one shoe missing. They did not sit up or look around. One arm swept the gravel slowly, like they were feeling for something they'd dropped. They repeated the same motion, same pace. I lowered the binoculars and waited for a different truck to appear. A farmer, a deputy, anyone who could deal with a stranger in the road without breaking my one rule for the day. Stay inside. The person rolled onto their back in one stiff motion. Their other arm jerked once, then fell flat. Their head turned toward my lane and remained fixed. They could not see my house from that distance and angle, but their face pointed straight down my road. My phone buzzed on the table. A new alert slid over the last one. Federal update. Individuals affected by the incident may display disorientation, insensitivity to injury, and sudden bursts of aggression. Do not attempt to restrain them. Avoid all contact. Insensitivity to injury. I looked back out. The person still had not tried to stand, but their hands kept working the gravel, fingers digging and dragging. The smart move was to walk away from the window. I stayed. A truck engine broke the quiet, low, and familiar. Earl's blue Ford came into view from town, moving slower than usual but still steady. Someone I knew was on that road, not just the stranger in the ditch. Instead of turning into his lane, the truck slowed even more when it reached the sedan. Earl stopped beside it for a second, then eased over into the opposite ditch to squeeze around without blocking the road. He was doing what the alerts had told us to do. Do not stop. Do not pick anyone up. He almost made it. As he rolled past, the person on the shoulder moved in a hard, ugly lurch. 1 second they were flat, the next they were on hands and knees facing the truck. Their heads snapped up. Earl's brake lights flashed on as he saw them. For a split second it looked like a normal scene. Someone hurt, someone stopping. I saw his arm move inside the cab like he was shifting into park. The person started crawling toward the truck. Their legs did not work right. One knee dragged and left a line in the gravel. Stones stuck to their hands. They did not slow. The right choice for me was to step away and let the scene be distant. I raised the binoculars instead. Earl opened his door and stepped out. He stayed near the hood and leaned forward a little. His hands were up, palms out. Even without sound, I could tell he was saying something like, "Hey there, you okay? Can you hear me? You need help?" The person lifted their head at his voice. Up close, their face was wrong. Their eyes were open but not fixed on him. They stared past him, wide and glassy. Their mouth was stretched like they were locked in the middle of a shout, but no sound reached me, just the faint hum of Earl's idling engine. Dried blood marked their chin and jacket. The one shoe they still wore was loose and untied. Earl took one more careful step and kept talking. He moved like a man who had broken up plenty of fights and never once thought the other person might try to bite his throat. The person lunged. 1 second they were on hands and knees. The next they were on their feet, body jerking but fast, closing the gap in a crooked rush. Earl tried to push back, but his boot slid on loose gravel. He went down on one knee with a hand on the fender. The person hit him hard enough to rattle the truck. From my window it looked like a tackle. 2 bodies collided and dropped for a moment. Then I saw Earl's back arch. His free hand clawed at the air, fingers spread. His mouth opened wide, and even at that distance I could see the shape of a scream that never reached me. The other head pressed into the side of his neck and held fast. The binoculars slipped in my hands and swung on the strap. They tapped the glass. My first thought, fast and wrong, was that this was still some kind of fight, that Earl would shove the stranger away and stand up. Then his hand stopped moving and hung at his side. The alerts had said, "Avoid all contact." They had said, "Do not stop." Watching my neighbor fall in the gravel, I finally understood those lines weren't just for show. I stepped back from the window until my shoulders touched the cabinets. The cat hissed and bolted out of the room. Out on the road, Earl's truck sat at an angle with the driver's door open and the engine still running. 2 figures were tangled on the shoulder. Only one of them moved. For a few seconds, I just stood there staring at the wall, my heart pounding as the scene on the road replayed in my head. Earl had left that morning like it was any other day. Now his truck idled in the gravel with the door open and someone was bent over him. I picked up the binoculars again and forced myself back to the window. The figures were still on the ground. The stranger moved in short, jerky bursts, shoulders hunching, head dipping. Earl did not move at all. The only other motion came from the spinning front tire, his foot having slipped off the brake. The alerts had told us not to call 911 unless it was life or death. I decided this definitely qualified and dialed anyway. The line rang once, then cut to a recorded voice that said, "All operators are currently busy. If you are in immediate danger inside your home, shelter in an interior room and wait for further instruction." "Do not go outside." It played on a loop, then disconnected. No one was coming to that road. Out on the shoulder, the stranger finally stopped moving. They lifted their head from Earl's neck and sat back on their knees. Their face and jacket were darker now. They tilted their head left and right like they were listening for something only they could hear. Then they let go of him and pushed to their feet. They didn't check his pulse or look for help. They just stood up and turned slowly, scanning the fields in a full circle. When their head turned toward my lane, I stepped away from the glass, even though I knew they couldn't see me from that distance. I watched from the edge of the frame as they took a few uneven steps, stopped, and then turned again. For a second, it looked like they might wander back toward town. Instead, they faced the gravel between Earl's mailbox and mine and started walking. They did not walk like a person out for exercise. Their arms hung too loose and swung too wide. Their feet hit the road hard and careless, sometimes sideways when a rock rolled under their shoe. They listed a little to the right, like one leg was shorter than the other. None of it slowed them down. My lane connected to the road about 300 yards ahead of the house. At their pace, they would reach it in a few minutes. I backed away from the window and let the blind fall all the way. Then I checked the back door again, turned the knob, pushed my shoulder against it, and engaged the deadbolt from the inside, a latch I had installed myself when I moved in. The TV cut back to the blue screen while I was in the mudroom. The tone blared hard enough that I flinched. A new line of text scrolled under the standard message. It said, "Do not signal or draw attention to your location. Extinguish exterior lights. Close blinds and curtains. Keep noise to a minimum." They had upgraded "stay home" to "hide." I went room to room again, this time closing the blinds completely and pulling the curtains shut, curtains I usually kept open. The house dimmed one window at a time until I had to turn on a small lamp in the hall just to keep from tripping over the cat. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from the kitchen drawer and crossed to the front door. The deadbolt on that door was decent, but the frame was old. I pressed my hand to the wood and pictured that stranger's full weight hitting it. Then I dragged the hall table over and wedged one leg tight under the knob. It wasn't much, but it gave the lock some added support. My phone lit up with a text from Nate while I was still breathing hard from moving furniture. He wrote, "You good?" I stared at the little gray bubble for a second and typed, "I'm home, don't come out here. It's bad." The typing bubble on his side flashed, then stopped. A reply came through a moment later. "Pulled off at some farm exit. People on the highway went crazy. One guy started smashing a window with his head. I'm in a barn. Service sucks." I wrote back, "Stay hidden. Lock the doors. If anyone you don't know comes up, don't open the door." They're saying that over and over. I almost added that I had just watched someone attack my neighbor, but stopped and erased that part I just sent. Call when you can. Outside, the distant hum that had sounded like a crowd all afternoon thinned into distinct noises, a shout far off. A car horn blaring and then cutting short, metal hitting metal somewhere past Earl's place. Closer, gravel crunched under steady steps. I killed the lamp in the hallway and stood in the dark by the front door listening. The steps weren't on the porch yet. They were still out on the lane, slow and regular. Every few seconds they paused, as if whoever it was had to rebalance before taking another few strides. It could have been someone else who had pulled off the road. A stranger from the sedan. A deputy making a slow check of the side roads. It could have been anyone. The alerts did not care who they were. They just kept saying the same thing. Do not approach. Avoid all contact. The steps reached the start of my gravel drive and turned in. The sound changed as rocks shifted under their weight. I felt each footfall through the boards by the front door. Whoever it was climbed slowly, one board at a time, until the last hollow thump put them level with the door where I stood with my hand on the knob and the hall table braced against it. They did not knock right away. There was just a long, close silence with one thin layer of wood between us. They didn't knock right away. For a few seconds there was just silence with one layer of wood between us. I heard my own breathing in the fridge, nothing else. My hand was still on the knob and the hall table pressed into my hip. I told myself not to say anything through the door. The alerts had been clear about noise. A soft scrape broke the quiet. It sounded like skin dragging down the door, slow and heavy from about eye level to halfway down. Whoever stood there had leaned in and pulled a hand along the wood. I let go of the knob and stepped back. 3 dull knocks followed, low on the panel, spaced out like someone testing the door. There was a pause, then 3 more, same rhythm, same spot. The table shifted a little with each hit. I backed into the hallway until I could see the front door but was out of reach if it somehow flew open. The knocking kept going. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. No words. On the TV, the anchor's voice cut off and the blue alert screen came back. The system voice said, "Remain indoors, lock all entrances, do not approach affected individuals, do not signal emergency services by light or sound unless your structure is being breached." The last word made me look at the frame again. It shook, but nothing cracked. The knock stopped. Porch boards creaked as weight shifted. I moved to the kitchen and lifted the blind on the small window over the sink. From that angle, I could see the edge of the porch. A shoulder and the side of a head filled the frame, too close for a full face. Dark hair, jacket stained down one side. The posture was stiff. They turned and I caught the profile. The slack mouth and wide stare matched what I had seen on the road. This was the same person who had been on the shoulder with Earl's truck. They didn't look toward the window. They didn't go back to the gravel. They stepped off the porch and dropped into the yard. They followed the side of the house with one hand on the siding, sliding along like a blind person feeling for doors. I moved with them from room to room, staying one wall ahead. In the small bedroom that faced the side yard, I eased the curtain open a crack. The stranger was 10 feet away, hand trailing along the paint, bumping the hose reel and downspout and adjusting each time. They reached the bedroom window and stopped, their head turned toward the glass. I let the curtain fall and held my breath. Their palm brushed the lower frame, fingers tapping once on the sill, then sliding on no impact, just that slow, searching contact. By the time I made it to the mudroom, the knob on the back door was already turning. It rattled, then twisted hard against the latch. The deadbolt held a shoulder, hit the panel twice. The frame flexed and snapped back. I grabbed an old metal toolbox and shoved it against the bottom of the door. The next hit shifted both the box and the table in the hall, but the lock stayed put. After a few more hard impacts, the pressure stopped. Gravel crunched a moment later. I went back to the kitchen window and looked out. The stranger was walking down my lane toward the road, that same crooked stride, arms hanging loose. For a while, nothing new happened. The sky went from pale to dull, then darker. The alerts on TV looped the same lines. I heated soup, ate a few spoonfuls at the counter, and listened for tires on gravel. As the light dropped, more people appeared on the road, one in a dress shirt, one in scrubs. Others I could not make out in detail. All of them walked the same way, a slow, determined pace that wobbled but never stopped. None of them tried the sedan. Each turned their head toward it for a second, then kept going toward town. By full dark, I had counted at least 5 strangers on a road where I could go a week without seeing anyone on foot. None of them traveled together or called out, they just followed the gravel. Around 7, the power blinked. The lights dropped, the TV went black, and for 1 second, the only sound was the wind. Then everything came back. I checked 2 flashlights from the drawer, found good batteries, and set them by my phone. Just after 8, the landline rang. Only my parents still used that number. I picked up and said, "Mom?" She answered right away and said they had heard sirens and watched 2 ambulances race past the end of their street, then nothing. A neighbor across from them had brought his father home from the hospital, even though the TV said not to. She told me the man had stood in the yard and stared at the house, and when his son tried to pull him inside, he grabbed him and wouldn't let go. They'd called the police. Nobody answered. I told her to lock their doors and stay away from the windows, to treat anyone in the yard who wasn't acting right as dangerous, even if they knew them. She started to say they couldn't just leave people outside like that, then stopped and said she understood. Before she hung up, she added, "If they tell us to leave, we're coming out to you." I told her that if they told us to leave tonight, it probably meant there was nowhere safe to go. After the call, I went through the house again. Every lock was still set. Every blind was down. The glow from the TV lit the hallway enough to see the outline of the front door and the table braced under the knob. Outside, the road had gone quiet again. I checked the back window one more time. The barn sat as a dark shape against the lighter sky. From that angle, I could not see the doors clearly, but something about the gap between them looked wrong. Like one side wasn't latched all the way. I told myself it was my eyes in the low light and went to bed fully dressed, with my phone on the nightstand and the heavier flashlight in my hand. The first real breach didn't come at the front door. It started at the barn. I woke up to metal banging behind the house. One hit, a pause, then another, followed by a scrape that didn't belong to wind or branches. The power was out. A narrow strip of gray showed around the curtains. The noise came again. 2 sharp bangs, then that scrape like someone was dragging steel on a track. Lying there, I pictured the yard and the outbuildings. Only one thing on the property could make that sound: the barn doors. I grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, checked my phone, and saw 5:41 a.m. with a stack of unread alerts. I moved down the hall, keeping the light off. In the kitchen, I lifted the blind over the sink just enough to see out. The barn sat 30 yards back, a darker block against the early sky. One of the big sliding doors that should have been closed was open a few inches. The right panel jumped as something hit it from the inside. Another impact rattled the metal. Then a hand pushed through the gap, fingers pale and scraped. It grabbed the outside panel like it didn't understand how to work it. The arm pulled back, then drove forward, shoulder first. The opening widened. I let the blind fall and stepped away. The idea of going out to slam the door ran into the picture of Earl on the road. The alerts that had sounded dramatic yesterday were now etched in my mind like rules. Stay inside, avoid contact, do not try to help, metal shrieked. The door jumped wider. Something squeezed through and hit the ground on hands and knees. I moved to the small bedroom that faced the barn and opened the curtain a crack. The person from the road pushed up to their feet in the dirt. They didn't limp. Their head turned slowly in a full circle, taking in the yard. When their face turned toward the house, I let the curtain drop and held still. After a few seconds, I risked another look. They were staring past my window toward the front porch. A second figure stumbled out of the barn behind them, bumping the jamb. This one wore light scrubs and bare feet. They steadied on the frame, then stepped up beside the first, both sets of eyes fixed on the front of the house. I left the bedroom and checked the front door. The deadbolt was set, the chain was on, and the hall table still braced under the knob. The bat leaned where I'd left it. Gravel crunched as they came around the side of the house. The sound changed when they stepped onto the concrete pad. The porch boards creaked. The first hit on the door came a beat later. A shoulder slammed into the panel hard enough to make the frame jump. The table slid an inch. A second impact followed. The chain rattled. I jammed the bat under the knob with the barrel wedged into the floor. The next blow sent a vibration through the metal and into my hands, but the brace held. They didn't try the handle, they just threw themselves at the same spot again and again. Wood groaned. A crack opened along the jamb by the dead bolt plate. White paint flaked off. Screws started to lean. The landline still had a dial tone. I grabbed it and dialed 911. The same recording played, telling me to move to an interior room if my home was being forced and to wait. Then it cut off. Another hit shoved the door far enough that I could see a thin strip of gray light along the edge. One of the screws at the strike plate had pulled halfway out. My phone buzzed. Nate had sent a message. "You okay?" I typed back with one thumb while keeping my other hand on the bat. 2 at my front door came out of my barn. "I'm barricaded. Stay where you are. Do not come here." I sent it as the door jumped again. A new alert banner flashed. It said, If your structure is being actively forced, move to an interior room with a solid door. Barricade if possible, avoid close contact with affected individuals. I backed away from the front door and pulled the bat free. The hall table shifted as I moved. If I stayed and the frame snapped, I would be 3 feet from them with nowhere to go. In my bedroom, I pushed the dresser across the floor until it pressed against the door. The legs screeched on the boards. I wedged the desk chair under the handle and leaned my shoulder into the wood. The pounding at the front of the house sounded farther away now, but just as steady. Then the pattern changed. The hits moved along the walls. Glass rattled in the window above my bed. A flat hand slapped the pane once, then slid along the frame. Fingers tapped the corners, feeling for a weakness. The tapping stopped. Knuckles struck the glass harder. A white star spread from the impact point. Another hit widened it. A third blow punched a hole through cold air pushed into the room. An arm came through up to the elbow. The skin on the forearm was scraped, but the hand didn't flinch. Fingers opened and closed, groping for the lock or the frame. I stepped to the side and swung the bat down on the arm just above the wrist. Bone gave with a thick crack. The hand folded at a wrong angle. The arm jerked back through the hole, leaving a smear of dark blood on the glass. Outside, something grunted once, then staggered away from the wall. They went back to the doors after that. I could track them by sound, front to back, then around the side. Every few seconds, another hit landed somewhere on the shell of the house. None of the barriers broke all the way, but each one sounded a little weaker. I sank down behind the bed, kept the bat across my knees, and watched the strip of light at the bottom of the bedroom door. The walls shuddered now and then with new impacts. Time turned into a count of hits and pauses. I watched the thin line of light under the bedroom door and waited for the crack of wood giving way. It never came. After a while, the blows spread out, more dragging along the walls than driving at them. Once something slid down the siding and hit the porch. Another set of steps shuffled off toward the back. The gray outside the curtains brightened. The next sound wasn't from the house. Engines rolled in from the road, low and steady, more than one. Tires crunched on gravel, metal rattled. A louder motor gunned once, then settled into idle. I crawled to the window, stayed below the sill, and lifted the curtain a few inches. Several big trucks blocked the lane. Men climbed down in helmets and vests, moving in short, practiced motions. I couldn't read any patches, but they weren't local cops. A few peeled off toward Earl's Drive. 2 jogged to the white sedan, glanced inside, and kept going. Another group walked straight down my lane. They stayed spaced out with weapons raised, eyes on the house. When they reached the yard, one of them shouted something. He repeated it louder. "If anyone is inside, stay away from the windows. Do not open the door. We are clearing the property." I stayed next to the wall and said, "I'm in the back bedroom. I'm alone." My voice sounded thin, but he must have heard. "Copy that. Stay put," he answered. Boots thudded on the porch. 2 men came up. One nudged the body there with his boot. The other pointed at the cracked jamb and said something I couldn't catch. The leader nodded and waved them on. "Clear it," he called. 3 hard blows hit my front door near the hinges. Wood split. The chain snapped. The door swung in until it jammed against the hall table. A rifle barrel came through first, sweeping the front room. I stayed behind my own door until a voice in the hall said, "Back bedroom, clear, civilian inside." I slid the dresser back a little and opened the door. A man in uniform stood there, visor up. "Hands where I can see them," he said. I set the bat down and raised my hands. He looked me over quickly for blood or wounds. "You hurt?" he asked. "No," I said. "They just hit the doors and the window." He glanced at the broken glass above the bed and the dark streak under it. "You stopped that one," he said. "Good." Someone in the kitchen called, "Basement access is open, blood on the steps, no bodies." Another voice from the front said, "2 down on the porch, no movement." Short bursts of gunfire snapped from behind the house, then stopped. The man in the hall listened, touched the side of his helmet, said a few words I could not hear, then looked at me again. "This house is clear for now," he said. "You're going to stay inside." Do not leave unless we tell you. Understand? I asked if they were evacuating us. He shook his head. The roads are bad. Shelters are full or closed. Best thing you can do is sit tight and stay quiet. How bad is it? I asked. He looked like he'd heard that all morning. Bad enough, he said. If you can hear our trucks, you're still better off than most. Don't move toward trouble. Let us push it away from you. He stepped back and called, "Mark this one occupied, partial breach." Then he asked, "Anyone else live here?" I told him no. He had me repeat my full name and wrote it on a small pad from his vest. A short horn blast sounded from the road. Engines revved. He checked his wrist and looked at me one more time. "You got food and water?" he asked. I said I did. "Make it last," he said. "Boil what you can. Tape your vents if you smell anything off. Keep it dark at night. They move toward light and sound." It was everything the TV had said with less comfort. "What about calling for help?" I asked. "Phones are jammed or dead in most places," he said. "If this street goes bad, you'll know before we do. Until then, stay down." He started toward the front room, then paused. "If anyone comes to your door and we're not with them, do not open it," he said. "Doesn't matter if you recognize them, you wait for a voice you heard today and a name you know." Then he was gone, moving with the others back through what was left of my front door. I followed far enough to see them cross the yard in a tight line, rifles up. They didn't look back. From the window, I watched them hit Earl's place. They went in, came out, and left him where he was. One truck ran a hose along the ditch and around the sedan, spraying a low mist that hugged the ground. The men who handled it stayed upwind and wore full masks. After a few minutes, the trucks turned and rolled out to the main road. No one came after them to fix my door or tape my window. No ambulance pulled up. It was just me, the open frame and the wind moving through it. My phone buzzed with a new alert even though the power was still out. "Containment operations are in progress in your area. Remain in your home. Do not travel to shelters without direct instruction. Do not attempt to flag down passing vehicles." I believe the last line now. The only vehicles out here belonged to people who weren't stopping. I went back to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the cracked glass and the dried smear where the arm had been. The house didn't feel safe. It felt like a box someone had ticked on a list. They had seen me, counted me, and driven away. They hadn't said when they would be back. The trucks were gone before noon. Their tire tracks cut deep grooves in the lane and across my yard, then vanished at the main road. The only proof they'd been there was the broken front door, the faint bite of whatever they had sprayed in the ditch, and the fact that I was still alive. I went through the house after they left, not because I felt brave, but because if something was going to come through a weak point, I wanted to find it before dark. The front jamb was cracked from shoulder height to the floor. The chain hung broken. The hall table had a new dent. The bedroom window had a spiderweb of cracks around the hole. From the kitchen, I could see the barn doors more clearly in daylight. One panel stood half open, bent on its track. Dark streaks marked the inside where something had pushed and scraped. The yard between the barn and the house was stamped with prints I didn't want to read. I thought of going out to close the doors. The idea of walking those 30 yards, even in daylight, made my throat tighten. Instead, I dragged a heavy shelf from the mudroom into the front hall and propped it against what was left of the door. It wasn't pretty, but it would slow anything that came straight at it. My phone still had a weak signal. The power flickered back on and then settled. I plugged the phone in and scrolled through the alerts I had missed. They all said the same few things in different orders. Stay inside, don't travel, avoid hospitals, don't try to pick people up. There were 2 short messages from Nate. One said, still in the barn, heard trucks on the highway. Think the guard went through. The other later said, one of the guys here is sick. He keeps staring at the door. We locked him in an office. I typed, if he starts acting like the people on TV, you keep that door shut no matter what he says, call me if you can. He never did. Around 1 in the afternoon, I decided I couldn't sit and guess anymore. I took the bat, opened the back door, and stepped onto the concrete. The air smelled like cut hay and that sharp chemical from the ditch. No one walked the gravel, no engines passed. I started with the porch. 2 bodies lay at the base of the steps where the men had pushed them aside. One was the stranger from the road. The other was the one in scrubs from the barn. Both had dark holes in their foreheads. Their eyes stared at nothing. At the barn, I stopped a few feet back. The door hung crooked. Inside, the dim light showed broken sacks, tools knocked over, dark marks along the walls. My truck sat near the back with a streak down the side. Nothing moved, and I slid the door as far closed as it would go. It didn't meet the latch, but at least it covered the gap. I threaded a length of chain through the handles and padlocked it. On the way back to the house, I let myself look toward Earl's place. His truck was still in the ditch where the men had stepped around it. From my yard, I couldn't see his body, only the roof of the cab and the top of the mailbox. Inside, the TV had gone from live coverage to a recorded message. A woman in a suit stood in front of a seal and said this was a temporary emergency, that resources were being moved, that we were all safer if we stayed in our homes. She thanked first responders, asked for patience, and never once used the word they'd sent to my phone. The word zombie stayed in the text, not on her tongue. When the message cut out, the channel showed a still screen with a list of counties under first zombie alert and a line along the bottom that read, "Do not leave your home under any circumstances." My county's name sat in the middle. I muted the sound and sat on the couch with the bat across my knees. The house felt both too quiet and too loud. Every small creak landed heavier than it had 2 days ago. Day 1 wasn't over. It had just stopped pretending to be normal. By late afternoon, the house was quiet and the trucks were gone. The TV still showed the same woman reading the same careful lines, so I shut it off. I already knew the rules. Stay home, stay put, wait. I filled the tub and bottles with water, moved my food to one low cabinet, checked my flashlights, and sealed the hallway vent with duct tape like the soldier had told me. Still in the chair, my phone buzzed. A new alert said, "For your safety, remain in your current shelter for at least 24 hours from the time of the first alert. Do not travel to seek family or friends. If you see people you know acting strangely, do not let them inside." I climbed down and called my mom. She sounded tired. She said the power kept flickering and my dad wanted to drive west. I told her the alert said the same thing as before, that if they left now, they would meet every bad thing between here and there on the road. She went quiet, then said, "We'll stay. For tonight, at least." A minute later, the line crackled and dropped. When I tried to call back, I got a busy signal. Outside, the light drained away. I shut off every bulb except the one over the stove and hung a blanket over the cracked bedroom window. At the kitchen table, I opened a notebook and wrote the day out from the beginning. The chili, the first alert, the car in the ditch, the stranger in the road, Earl, the knocks, the barn, the soldiers. It felt like a list of reasons not to open the door again. I didn't want to sleep under broken glass, so I pulled the mattress off the guest bed and dragged it into the hallway, close to the bathroom and away from the front door. I set the heavier flashlight and the bat beside it, turned off the last light, and let my eyes adjust. The shelf braced against what was left of the door was just a darker shape at the end of the hall. For a while, nothing happened. Then the landline rang once, one short, hard ring. I sat up and watched it. When it didn't ring again, I picked up the receiver. There was no dial tone, no recording, just dead air. I set it back and listened to the quiet. A few minutes later, I heard tires on gravel out on the lane. One vehicle rolled along slowly with its lights off. No glow crossed the curtains, only rubber on rock. The engine stopped in front of my place. A door opened and shut. Footsteps crunched up the drive, then onto the porch. They sounded steady like boots. I stayed on the mattress and wrapped my hand around the bat. Knuckles tapped on the front door. 3 quick, normal knocks, not the dull pounding from that morning. A man's voice called, "Jacob Carver, this is Sergeant Miller. We spoke earlier. I have new instructions for you." I need you to come to the door." I didn't move. The man who had stood in my hallway with a rifle never told me his name. He knocked again. "Jacob, we're relocating healthy civilians to a safer site," he said. "If you open this door and come with us, you don't have to ride out the night alone." Under the idle of the engine, I heard another sound near the porch, a wet, uneven breath that didn't match his words. "Sergeant Miller," I said, still on the floor, "what's the one thing you told me when you left this house?" He answered right away. "I told you to stay inside until we came back," he said. That was wrong. He told me to stay inside unless they told me to leave. He never promised to come back. The breathing on the porch shifted closer to the gap by the broken jamb. The voice outside stayed smooth. "Open the door, Jacob. This is your chance to get out while it's quiet." The last line from the alert sat in my head. "Do not leave your home under any circumstances." I lay back down without answering and held the bat tighter. On the other side of the broken door, something dragged its hand along the wood and tried the useless knob. That was how day one ended for me. No all clear, no rescue, just a stranger using the right words in the wrong way, knocking on a door I was done opening.